Test 1, 2, 3, 4. Checking in on my mic. What's that? Go. Good evening from the University of Findlay, and welcome to this City Council at Large Forum, co-sponsored by WFIN AM, WLFC FM, UFTV, and The Courier. I'm WFIN News Director Doug Jenkins, and I'll serve as the moderator for tonight's forum. Now, tonight's forum, an opportunity for you to find out more about the individuals who are running for City Council at Large seats. There are 4 candidates for 3 open spots. I've selected the questions for this evening's forum, and no candidate is aware of what will be asked or the order that it will be asked in. The format of the forum consisting of a 2-minute opening statement by each candidate, and that will be followed by a 2-minute closing statement at the end of tonight's festivities. I'll ask questions to the candidates. They'll each have 1 minute to respond, and if I feel that a follow-up question is warranted, there will be 1 minute response time to that as well. The order that the candidates are sitting has been selected at random. Our candidate participants this evening are Mary Harshfield, Jeff Wobser, Tom Schindeldecker, and Grant Russell. So let's get started. We begin this evening with opening statements from Mary Harshfield.
Good evening. My name is Mary Harshfield. I was born and raised in Findlay. Actually, I was born in Detroit. It was an accident. But I actually lived here in Findlay all my life until I finished school. I would like to say that, well, I actually taught in Michigan and a year in Ohio too. And I came back after I retired. My mom was still alive, and I was able to enjoy her last few years with her. And in that time, I began to notice again how things were in Findlay, and they were wonderful, except that I did notice a lack of balance, that there weren't very many Democrats in town, or so they say, and I felt responsible for trying to bring more awareness. I would like to use some of the skills that I acquired as a school teacher. I feel that I learned how to help settle differences between people, as you have to do with students, and also use creativity to solve a lot of problems, trying to figure out how to solve learning difficulties that my students would have. And I would like to continue maybe helping solve problems here in town.
All right, next we move on to Jeff Wobser.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Wobser, and I'd also like to thank WFIN, WLFC, University of Findlay, and the Courier for hosting this debate for the general election coming up on November 3rd. First off, I'd like to thank all the folks who voted for me in the primary and got me to this point. It's very much appreciated, and I look forward to earning your vote for November 3rd general election. Just a little bit about me. I'm originally from Findlay, Ohio. Was born and raised here, and had the fortunate situation where I was able to take part in a lot of activities in Findlay through the schools, and that was able to get me on to the University of Tennessee, where I was an athlete there and coached and put myself through school. Went to work for Marathon Petroleum Company for 27 years, and back in 2001, my wife Jane and I moved back to Findlay, Ohio, and was pleased to get back to Findlay. Believe it or not, the town hadn't changed all that much, but it really had changed a little bit and continues to get better. when I came back to town, there were two things that I wanted to do. The first one was to come back and give back to the program that gave me so much, which was our Findlay High School swim team. I did that by coaching for 11 years and running that program. Now, my goal is to get onto City Council and give back to the city itself. So coming up in November, I'll again ask for your vote, and I look forward to working with the city and working with my Republican friends on the council to continue to further the city and do some good things and continue our good fortune. Thank you.
Jeff. We now move on to Tom Schindeldecker.
I am Tom Schindeldecker, and I'm completing my first term on City Council. Prior to that, I was news director of the Findlay Publishing Company radio station for 45 years. Spent a lot of time in City Council chambers watching deliberations and debates, learning a little bit about how the city is going to operate. I would say in the past 2 years, we have made tremendous progress in Findlay and Hancock County. And I say Findlay and Hancock County because we have formed some cooperative ventures with the county commissioners, with the educational community, and the business community. In about 6 weeks, we will have, make that about 10 or 12 weeks, we will have a combined city-county health department, something we have been striving to achieve for almost half a century. We're going to be cleaning up some open sewers that were classified as ditches next year, something that we've been working on for a number of years. There's also, of course, the flood mitigation problem, although the county commissioners have the final say in that. The city has a stake in that as well. We have worked well with all of the different agencies, and we've worked well with one another, with the administration, and I would like to be a part of continuing doing some of the good things that we've done over the past 2 years.
Thank you, Tom. And next we move to Grant Russell.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you to WFIN, to the Courier, and to the University of Findlay for hosting tonight's event. As I talk to citizens throughout our town, I hear folks that are proud of Findlay. They notice the progress we're making, and road work, changes in downtown, new and expanding businesses, and they are genuinely excited about the future of Findlay, and I share in that excitement. When I ran 2 years ago, I campaigned on a renewed focus on infrastructure and safety services and in improved communications. In the past 2 years, our city has increased our capital spending on infrastructure. We're paving roads. Take a look at Tiffin Avenue and North Main Street. We've added police, including the return of the Special Assignment Unit. And we've also launched a new website. We do have our challenges: flooding. Workforce development is something I think you'll hear more and more about. We have jobs. We need employees. We also need workers who can pass drug tests. And that leads to a big issue that we are facing, and that's heroin in our community and the crime that it brings. But together, as a community, we are up to these challenges. And while I'm there, I want to say, if you think that legalizing marijuana is going to make situations in our city better, I think you're sadly mistaken. I strongly urge you to vote no on issue 3. 2 years ago, I made a personal commitment to the citizens of Findlay that I would communicate with them. And that's why I created the 419, which is a short summary I write up after each council meeting and on issues that I think are important and need to be communicated. I post them on my website, russellforfindlay.com, and also post them on Facebook. And I invite you to go read them for yourself. You'll know where I stand. Appreciate being here tonight. Let's get going, Doug.
All right, and with that said, we'll start with our first question, and we'll go in descending order. Every other candidate, we'll start with the first person who went last, I guess, last time. I didn't say that right at all. Let's go ahead and dispense with the obvious questions that most people probably ask you about as you're out knocking on doors. Mr. Wobser, we'll start with you. We've heard about the flood mitigation talk. Certainly, county commissioners have the final say on that, but the city has a lot of input. We've seen a new plan from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. It does away with the levee on the east side. Given what you've seen now, are you comfortable pushing forward for it, or what are your thoughts moving forward?
You know, it's a great question. I had the opportunity to work the Republican booth at the county fair, and there were two things that people wanted to talk about at the county fair when we were out there. Number one is they wanted to talk about Donald Trump, That was interesting in itself. But they wanted to talk about flood mitigation. And there became very, very obvious that we've got a very sharp divide in the citizens of Hancock County on where they fall on this. The county people outside the city, by and large, seem to be very much against the current plan, and the city people, although we've not really heard from them specifically, I would guess that they're in favor of it, so that they want to get rid of the flooding just in general. So to say that I'm in favor for the current plan, I'm not sure. Quite honestly, I've got a funny feeling that we're going to come up with something that we haven't seen quite yet, that's going to be a compromise between where we're at today and where we're going to be ultimately. But at the end of the day, I firmly believe and will continue to support a solution to flooding in Findlay. I just don't know if we've seen the final answer yet.
All right, thank you. Mr. Schindeldecker, same question.
First of all, I want to say I really do feel for the rural community and the land that would be lost in a plan such as this. It is important, and there's a passionate and there's also a business aspect to that. I really do feel for them. Almost 2 centuries ago, the railroad came through Hancock County. Some land was lost, but it was a good thing. About a half a century ago, Interstate 75 was constructed through Hancock County. Again, a lot of land was lost, in this case, much of it in the city, but it too was a good thing. I have talked with many people, including 2 of the most obvious and respected leaders of the agricultural community. One doesn't agree with me, one does. My feeling on the plan that we have before us, I say this to the agricultural community, look at this plan, forge the best compromise you can, but then accept it. This is the best plan we are going to get. The number of acres that are going to be lost are the fewest. The price is right. Doing nothing is not an option.
All right.
Well, I agree with Tom. Doing nothing is not an option. One thing I am encouraged by in this process is that the feedback loop seems to be working. When the levy was on the table, we heard a lot from families and citizens out in the east side neighborhoods talking about, that were in these flooded areas, or to be flooded areas, and they were giving their input to the Army Corps of Engineers, and they made a case, and enough of a case, so the Army Corps re-looked at their solution and said maybe the levy isn't the best option, and that's why it's removed. So the fact that the Army Corps is in town, is taking input, is important. But the solution here is not just a Findlay solution, it's not just a Hancock County solution, it's a multi-county solution that needs to be put together. Cooperation is going to be what wins the day.
All right. Ms. Hirschfield.
I agree that it's a multi-county proposition. I feel that both the city and the county have been involved in causing the problems, aside from what occurred naturally anyway. And I do think that it's unfortunate that someone has to feel the pain, and I agree that it's a good idea it's good that the Army Corps has managed to come to at least some compromise, and perhaps they will some more. But I do think that we have to trust the experts, the engineers in this whole project, and I feel that that's going to be our best bet. But there may be some other steps that need to be taken. And I do think it's also important to continue what cleaning of the river is possible, and also to try to move on some of this a little faster.
All right. That'll bring us to our second question. And again, we'll stick with the obvious ones that have probably come up again at the fair, going door to door. One people like to talk about will be downtown traffic and downtown parking. Now we've seen a new plan that's come about and will be implemented here soon with reverse angle parking on Crawford Street. Do you believe that we're working in the right direction when it comes to parking solutions for downtown, and what more can be done? We'll start with you, Mr. Schindeldecker.
I happen to be chairman of the Street, Sidewalks, Parking, and Streetlights Committee, and although the parking aspect of that particular committee responsibility lies off-street rather than on-street, I was opposed to the reverse angle parking on Main Street for a number of reasons. Not so much the parking, but the fact that traffic lanes would be lost. the fact that there are no parallel streets that could handle traffic north and south getting off of Main Street. However, I was in favor and was chairman of an ad hoc committee that took another look at the proposal on Crawford Street. If we're going to try this, that's an ideal place. It's probably the best location to try the reverse angle parking. I was insistent, however, when my committee looked at that plan, that we have a sunset provision. We're probably within the next couple of weeks going to restripe Crawford Street. We'll have that parking proposal in place. By October 1st of next year, after we've experienced it through all kinds of weather, we'll either vote to continue it or drop the plan. It won't just continue on indefinitely without some kind of final action.
All right. Mr. Russell?
Doug, we are indeed, I think, moving in the right direction. I agree with Tom. It's nice to try something at especially a low cost like the Crawford Street solution. We're going to add 30 plus close-in parking spaces. I believe they're going to be designated as 2-hour parking spaces, and that will have a tremendous impact. But as Tom said, it's within a year, if we get the feedback that it's not working, it's easy to undo. In addition, keeping parallel parking on the north side of the street helps. Another part of the solution also is the additional spaces that are being added to the Performing Arts Center. And these are long-term parking spaces. So people who are working downtown will have a place to park. They can walk a couple of blocks to work. They won't be in fear of getting tickets and having to do the 2-hour shuffle. Let's see if that's going to work and if people will take advantage of free parking a couple of blocks away. But bottom line, having a parking problem in downtown, that's a good thing. That means people want to come downtown, and I'd rather have a parking problem than nobody coming downtown.
Okay. Ms. Harshfield?
I agree that we need more parking downtown. I have questioned whether or not the reverse angle parking is a good way to go, if there wouldn't be another way to find parking lots that would be accessible for especially the problems that workers that work downtown have. However, it will be interesting to at least have a chance to try it and be able to leave it if it turns out to be a problem with the reverse angle. I've been personally a little troubled by the idea of the one-way directions going outward from Main Street. I was noticing at the Oktoberfest a couple of weeks ago that those streets would be completely inaccessible. The parking in there would be inaccessible when the streets are blocked off like that. But I suppose it would be a good place to put the emergency personnel. I would find it very interesting to be on the council next year when they make that final decision.
Thank you. Mr. Wobser?
Like Grant said, I think it's a good problem to have, is that we have so many people that want to come downtown. The businesses down there are flourishing, doing very, very well. I think Crawford Street reverse angle and going one way off of South Main Street is a good test for this situation. My guess is it's going to work out just fine, but again, if it doesn't, it is just a test that Tom put in, and I think that was a great way to go about that. The parking at the Performing Arts Center is another great addition, and I think we'll find little pieces like this as time goes along, but beyond that, I think the city needs to be very careful about how much we get involved in parking spaces. Parking spaces in general are not revenue generating. They do help the downtown merchants to a degree, but we need to watch how much we spend on that type of thing. The money that's going to be spent on the Performing Arts Center, I think that is a good plan there and a good funds to spend. But I think we're in good shape going forward. Things will pop up unfortunately, as buildings burn down or something like that, and like the Argyle. Let's hope that doesn't happen anymore, obviously. But as opportunities come along, we'll take advantage.
All right. Well, we've dispensed with the obvious questions now. Now the hard questions are going to come. But first, I think we'll take our 2-minute break a little early so we can make sure we're set on the floor, and we will take a break when we come back. Still more to come as we learn more about our council at large candidates. Back with more.
On behalf of the Chamber of Commerce, welcome to Findlay and Hancock County. We're so glad you chose the University of Findlay, and we're excited to have you in our community. The Chamber of Commerce has been representing the interests of Hancock County businesses for over 125 years. We serve as a resource for businesses and individuals seeking local information and provide unique opportunities to connect businesses and individuals to the community through various programs and events. We are a great resource for linking you to local businesses and professionals in the community. You might attend one of our networking events or even find us helpful in searching for internship opportunities. We encourage you to go out and explore Findlay. We're here to answer any questions you might have about your new community along the way. You can find us online at FindlayHancockChamber.com or follow us on social media with Findlay Hancock County Chamber of Commerce.
Welcome to Findlay. The Hancock County Convention and Visitors Bureau is happy to have you join the excitement in our town. There is so much for you to explore. Visit one of our many parks for walking trails, disc golf, or paddle boating. And when the weather turns cold, we even offer cross-country skiing and snowshoeing. Head downtown to explore a variety of dining options, coffee shops, entertainment, and nightlife. Many special events happen throughout the year. During the school year, you won't want to miss events like Rock on the Rooftop, Oktoberfest, Winterfest, Art Walk, and Third Thursdays, just to name a few. We are here to inform you of what's happening in the community. Unforgettable memories are waiting for you. Just dive in and discover them. Visit us online at visitfindlay.com for our calendar of events and other great resources, or get social with us on Facebook and Twitter. We can't wait for you to experience Findlay. It's easy for everyone to fall in love with our community.
And welcome back to the University of Findlay as we continue to meet our council at large candidates, talking about the issues in the city of Findlay. We've talked about flood mitigation and parking, and still plenty more to come. Let's start with our next question. We'll start with you, Mr. Schindeldecker, on this one. Over the past year, we've been talking about the debate over the deferral of some income taxes for some businesses in the city. It's been controversial for some. Some businesses would like to take part, but they're not sure how they could get involved with that, and there's not a clear policy in place. Do you support the ability of some businesses to push their tax payments to the end of the year around October 15th? And if so, would you be in favor of making a more clearly defined process to go about that for other businesses?
I would definitely favor continuing the process. We have a lot of multinational and global companies. Some of the information required to put together an income tax return or report is not necessarily readily available at the time that is convenient for the city of Findlay on a quarterly basis. It's just almost impossible for many companies to do that. Even some local companies that might have some of their payroll done by an outsourced might have difficulty. I think it's essential. Is the process being used too much? I can't answer that. Should there be a criteria for what companies would be eligible? I'm not close enough to the situation to answer that question directly, but I would say probably, yes, it would be probably in the city's best interest to develop some kind of criteria. But I do favor allowing companies to continue to operate.
All right. Mr. Russell, same question.
Doug, there are obvious advantages to the program. It does help smooth out our income stream, and for the companies that do get to enjoy the benefits from the program, it is helpful for them. Having said that, it is a complex issue. Andrew Thomas, our tax administrator, gave a presentation to City Council. It took 71 slides for him to explain the differences and details of this program. Having said that, I would like to see this program well documented, well explained, just so we clear up these questions. So there's not questions why this program, which is beneficial for the city, so there isn't questions about it being some kind of give to specific companies and not to the others. And in addition, for the next city tax administrator, so they know how this program works and how to implement it. I would also like to see better reporting on the program. How many companies are in it? What are monthly and quarterly takes from the program. Overall, I like it. I want to see the openness improved.
All right, thank you. Ms. Harshfield?
I definitely think that there needs to be more transparency in the whole issue of the tax deferments. I believe that if a company feels it's necessary to ask for these deferments, that they need to be more forthcoming and letting everybody know that it shouldn't be kept secret. There has to be public knowledge that it's a justified situation, and perhaps it is justified. Perhaps there are good reasons, but we need to know them. And it also, I believe, should be handled by more than one or two or three persons to make these decisions.
Thank you. Mr. Wobser?
I struggle with this situation a little bit from the standpoint that I do agree with Tom and Grant that it is a good program for the city as far as our overall finances are concerned. However, when you have this situation where the people who are getting a deferment are not made public and there seems to be no particular guidelines as to how deferments are gained, it gives the appearance of impropriety. Doesn't mean that there is, certainly. And I know that the mayor and the tax administrator have said that there's no problems there, and I agree with that. I'm sure that's the case. However, it does make things look like there could be. And at some point in time, if somebody wanted to, they could give deferments, potentially, to somebody that was just a political backer. And I think that situation has to be taken care of.
All right. Moving along, let's talk about the issue of police cameras in the town. Certainly, it's a decision to be made by the police department, but a lot of public input, but it costs money, and that's where city council comes in. Given that we know following a police-involved shooting earlier this year that we do not have dash cams for the police department, and we do not have body cams for police officers, is that something that you would support allocating money for in the city budget in the future? I'll start with you, Mr. Russell.
Yes, I'd support it as long as we can implement it correctly, and not take away from our police force, from actually the force that is out in public doing the policing. A camera by itself will not help the situation. It only is a tool with the police. This is one of the situations where it's easier said than done. When you put a body camera on a police officer, everything that body camera records is public evidence, and there is public records. And so the question is how do you manage that public records? How do you store it? It's easier said than done, but I think it's something that we should continue to investigate and look at doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Harshfield?
I strongly believe we need to have cameras at least in the cars, if not on the persons of the police. They have as much at stake, I think officers have as much at stake to have proof that of what their story is. It's not that they aren't to be trusted, but a lot of times it's hard to have evidence if it's some drastic situation such as occurred earlier this year here in Findlay. I think that would be well worth reallocating some funds, or if necessary, to add a little tax on something in order to support it, because it is so important.
Thank you. Mr. Wobser?
First off, I wholly support our Findlay Police Department. I think they do an outstanding job. As far as the cams go, I think that technology continues to evolve, and so do the laws that surround the technology. I think that for a city our size to wait a little bit, especially on the cameras that go on the officers, to see how that law continues to evolve and how they're being used in some of the larger metropolitan areas, gives us the ability to wait a little bit and then see if we want to make that investment. It is quite an investment monetarily, so we need to be very, very careful when we spend that amount of money, that it's going to be the right thing to do for officers and for the city.
Thank you. And Mr. Schindeldecker?
I would agree that the technology is evolving, as well as the laws regarding what comes out of these cameras. I also think something that is evolving is the state's willingness to provide matching funds. We've seen that happen in a number of other communities. I would hate to designate a couple $100,000 for cameras and only to find out that we could have gotten matching funds from the state if we waited another 6 months. It's something that needs to be done. It will happen. I don't think it's a critical thing that needs to be done right now for those reasons.
Hey, Doug, this is really a serious question. And there's no way that 1 minute gives this question its due. Policing is changing dramatically
I
because
tell you what,
of cameras.
I'll give you each an additional minute on this if you would like.
Please.
We'll give you a chance for a rebuttal on what Grant's
Policing
gonna
is
say.
changing dramatically. Ask any police officer, and that camera changes everything. Our police force is CALIA certified. It's a certification organization that, in essence, it says you have procedures and you follow procedures. It's not just something that you jump into because you can buy a GoPro and put it on the shoulder of a police officer. But unfortunately, times are changing, and with the advent of everybody having a cell phone camera and incidences like, especially Cincinnati, it starts to change that perception. And I think that in the near term or in the long term, we're going to move to cameras because that is going to be the direction all police forces do. I want to make sure we do it in a fiscally responsible manner that doesn't take officers off the street.
Thank you. Ms. Harshfield, rebuttal?
I was going to comment. I think that there are a lot of funds that are available to pay for things such as cams for the police, and I really do think that the police are generally, not really causing problems, but do need more backup for themselves. And cities around Ohio and the country are implementing these cameras now, and it should not be that hard for us to do the same.
Mr. Wobser, anything to add or rebuttal?
No, just beyond the fact that, we have budgets, we have a budgeting process, we need to stay within those guidelines, and there's not money just laying around to do something. I think that if it was a terrible emergency, we could find the funding to do it. This is not that case, and when the time is right, we will budget the money to get this done.
Mr. Schindeldecker, anything
I have
else to
nothing
add?
further, thank you.
All right. Another thing that we've talked about a lot over the past year is the issue of recovery housing in Findlay. Now, in retrospect, is there anything that the city could have done differently to address the concerns that were raised by residents over the process before we finally came to the 2 houses that were selected? I'll start with you, Ms. Harshfield.
Okay, this is the question I probably studied the most. I was trying to find out all I can about recovery houses. I do feel that more should have probably been done to start out with to educate the public, especially in the neighborhoods that were likely to be used for more recovery housing, to the type of people that would be living in them and the good history in that kind of housing. It really is something to benefit people, but to be beneficial, the people that live there with them have to be happy that they're there. They have to be able to get along and be supportive.
Mr. Wobser, same question.
I think the process the first time around was difficult at best. I think the Adamus board had maybe didn't do their due diligence up front and paid the price for that. Ultimately, it looks like it's going to work itself out. Hopefully in the future, if we need to expand this program, that they will take the time to inform the citizens, inform the neighborhoods, so that they don't have that type of pushback, and it's very expensive for everybody involved.
Mr. Schindeldecker.
I think the original proposal for the house on the east side was a textbook example of how not to do it on the part of Adamus, on the part of the neighborhood that was opposed to it, and probably on the part of the city, which maybe carries some responsibility for helping to inform the public. I'm glad that we've gotten beyond that, and we have a couple that are up and running or about to be up and running. It's a good thing, but I think a little discretion on everybody's part wasn't shown the first time around, and I think it will be in the future.
Mr. Russell.
Doug, this is a situation where cooperation definitely rules the day, and the more open the communications could be early in the process, the better. But one thing that the city was asked to do, and we did not do and properly, was to change zoning law in order to stop any kind of recovery house from being in residential areas in the city. The research that I've done and that our zoning department did said that that just wasn't something that we could legally do. So in this situation, caution and not having a knee-jerk reaction, I think was a good response from the city.
I want to stay on the same subject and talk a little bit about what is the city's role in the fight against addiction. We've talked a lot over the last several months, several years about the problems that we're seeing when it comes to addiction in the community. But what role does city government play in that battle, and especially from city council? How do you see city council either helping or facilitating that help? We'll start with you, Mr. Wobser.
For me, that's a difficult question, Doug, from the standpoint that I believe that the city government ought to stick to the things that we are entrusted by the community to do. And I'm not, when we start talking about spending money in this area, I think we're outside of that purview. Now, there are things that the city can do to help facilitate getting a house placed. As Grant had mentioned, if there's zoning and things that need to be taken care of on that regard, and also communication and showing support. However, financially, I'm not sure that that is something that we need to be involved in financially as a city government.
Mr. Schindeldecker.
Beyond education to our police department, to our court system and so forth, I think the actual battle against heroin and other addictive substances ought to be done by the people that know the problem and have seen case studies on the best way to solve them. We can provide support, and we can provide a certain amount of money to see that our police force and our court system are educated in the proper manner, but that's about the extent of where I think we should go.
Mr. Russell.
Doug, this problem is pervasive in this community. When I first started on council, I did ride-alongs with the police and the dispatching department with the fire department, and it just amazed me how much heroin affects every aspect of city service delivery, especially police and the courts. Unfortunately, we're kind of on the back end of this thing. The solution, there is no one solution to the heroin problem. But the solutions that will be implemented will be community-wide solutions. The city is part of the community, and as such, we have an obligation to participate and to make our resources available. But there's simply no simple solution here.
Ms. Harshfield.
I believe, too, that it is a city problem, that we need everyone's help. I was reading today the program, the way they are implementing finding the problem students early in public schools, and I think that's a wonderful thing. There are many ways that the problem can be worked on from all sorts of other agencies. We, as a city, should be able to aid with more education and communication so that people will be able to, in general, recognize the problems and try to help come together as a whole family to try to solve them.
All right. Next topic, a little bit lighter, that in the form of leaf pickup. Now, the city has gone several years without leaf pickup due to the economic collapse of several years back. This year, it will return. But some have asked if we've survived long enough without it. Is it something that the city needs to be spending money on? We'll start with you, Mr. Schindeldecker. Do you believe this is a service that the city should continue to provide, and why?
Well, I'm glad we are, and I'm glad we have the financial situation that exists today that we can do so. I think it was a very prudent plan. It's not going to take several days as leaf pickup had taken in the past. It's a one-day thing. It's not going to require a whole lot of overtime on the part of city employees. If we can do it on this kind of basis, I'm all for it.
Mr. Russell.
The solution that is being implemented where the leaves have to be put in biodegradable bags is going to tremendously reduce the amount of labor that the city crews put into that. Before, it was about a $200,000 proposition, and it took so long, the crews had to start so early in neighborhoods that a lot of leaves hadn't fallen by the time or when they went through. Would I have personally, if it was just up to me to make that call, I probably wouldn't have re-implemented. But one of the other considerations in this is leaves that aren't picked up have a tendency to get into our storm sewer systems, and that causes problems. So it's kind of, there's a balancing act. No great concerns that we're doing it. I'm glad we're doing it for less money.
Ms. Harshfield?
Of course, I think it's a wonderful program and that we need to continue it. It is good that we have the biodegradable bags and the pickup. It's all positive. I don't see any negatives there.
Mr. Wobser?
I think that re-implementing it the way it's being done now is okay. Again, we've got to watch the finances, how much it's going to cost us overall. The one good thing, as Grant mentioned, the fact that it does help our gutters and the sewer systems to keep them clean. Otherwise, we have to perform other maintenance that's going to cost us money down the road. And when the streets get snow and leaves on them, it causes additional problems too, and it cuts down on the lifespan of our streets and curbs. So I think it's a good thing at this point in time. I'm glad, however, that we are still going to keep the outside groups that came in and dealing with efficiency and a lot of things that from an administrative standpoint that do relate to government, that from the business aspect that will help government to be more efficient and to run, quite honestly, better.
Mr. Schindeldecker?
You don't run a government as a business. You don't run a business as a government. That's not to say that there are not areas in which we can learn from each other. Maybe government learning from business more than the other way around. There are a lot of best practices that are developed in the private sector that we can and should, and in a lot of cases in Findlay are already implementing. That should continue. I think we've struck a balance. I think one of the things that people talk about most when they say that we operate too slow. We require 3 readings for most pieces of legislation. There's been criticism that we suspend our rules far too often. We've cut down on that. I think we've struck a good balance. Government doesn't move as swiftly as a business does, but government is government.
All right. Let's talk about the finances of the city. One thing that's been implemented over the last couple of years is a 2-year forecast in addition to the 1-year budget. Is enough being done to look at the future forecasts for Findlay's money and what perhaps can be done to be a better steward of that? We'll start with you, Ms. Harshfield.
I do believe it would be better to plan farther ahead and make 5-year plans and more than that. Things are changing so rapidly. The climate We have so many emergencies, things that hopefully we aren't going to have the flooding problem again, but we had a terrible storm a few years ago that took down a whole lot of trees. We have to have the ability to work with these kinds of situations. We have to be able to clean up. We have to be able to look at many other possibilities. That was really just one example of the kind of thing for preparedness and future planning.
Mr. Wobser.
I think that the city has done a great job so far in building up or rebuilding the rainy day fund so that we have a cash reserve going forward that will help us to weather any economic downturns that will come up, and they will come up. It'll happen again. We just have to be very diligent stewards of that money so that it doesn't get spent for whatever reason, so that it's there when we really do need it, so that we don't have to reduce our services to the citizens. As far as the budgeting goes, I believe this kind of relates back to the last question from the standpoint that that is something that businesses do all the time, long-term budgeting, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. And I think that's something that the city should continue to look at. It's done the 2-year budget's done a good job for them, and I think we ought to continue to expand that and look at a 5-year budget.
Mr. Schindeldecker.
We're looking in that direction, at least in areas such as capital improvements. We're working out much beyond a 2-year plan, working toward 5. However, we have to realize that this is a dynamic situation. It's almost like hitting a moving target. I've been responsible for putting long-term plans together on the level of a local church, for example. And by the time you get to about year 2, you're already revising 3, 4, and 5 because things do move dynamically and dramatically. We're working in that direction, and we should continue to do so.
Mr. Russell.
We have a 5-year rolling capital budget. We've had it for a few years now. This year is the first year we've had a 2-year operational budget. We'll be entering another 2-year operational budget for coming actually in November and December is when we'll start having hearings on it. All these things are good. We do have a completely full rainy day fund. We have extra money that we've also held, that we have in reserves. Where we need to continue to work and improve is in our long-range planning on infrastructure, on recreational facilities especially, and have conversations with the community about what kind of facilities that we do want to have and we do want to offer. And lastly, on succession planning. There are some key individuals in the city that are, I hate to tell them, they're not getting any younger, they're getting closer to retirement plan days, and we need to know who's going to be stepping into their shoes when they do retire.
All right. One more question, and then we'll get to our closing statements. The city continues to grow. We've seen a lot of growth in downtown, the city, like that. As the city continues to grow, what else is it
there. Other than that, as the city does grow, we'll have to look at potentially annexation into the city if that's something that needs to be done. But right now, I think we're on a pretty good path. We just need to refocus as time goes along.
All right. Mr. Schindeldecker.
Infrastructure obviously is going to be a dramatic and dynamic requirement as we continue to grow. But I think probably the biggest problem we're going to face as we continue to grow and progress is workforce. We mentioned that very early on. There are about 2,200 jobs that local businesses could fill over the next 18 months or so if they had the trained workforce, and as Grant Russell alluded to earlier, those who can pass a drug test. We'd have a workforce development project that's been underway for several months. It's going to have to be successful if we are going to continue to be able to fill the jobs that are going to be needed in this community. If they can't be filled here, they'll be filled somewhere else.
Mr. Russell?
Tom, I agree. Workforce development will be a big issue. Council will be having a committee of the whole meeting at the end of the month to hear about workforce development plans that are being worked on. But the cities, the main function, what we do to help and support this growth is strong infrastructure, good streets, water, sewer, storm sewer, and safety services, police, fire, courts, our zoning efforts, and providing those in the most cost-effective, cost-efficient, and best manner. That's what the cities needs to focus on. That's what we're going to focus on.
Ms. Harshfield?
I also believe that we need to work on infrastructure, keeping the roads up in all areas of the city. Some of the things I have found a little troubling, an example would be out at the mall. Try to maybe encourage more entrepreneurs to start more local businesses in there, as well as other businesses in town. But I do think that we have a role to play with that.
All right. That will bring us to the end of our question and answer period. We're going to move on now to our closing statements. Mr. Russell, you had the last opening statement, so you will have the first closing statement. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Doug. Thank you to WFIN, to the Courier, to the University of Findlay for once again hosting us tonight. You heard the word "I" a lot. I think this, I plan to do this, I've done that. And in this forum, that is appropriate. But one thing I've learned in my 2.5 years on council, and it's kind of reinforced this golden rule of representation, that's simply that I accomplish nothing by myself. The name of the game on council is cooperation. We need to have city-county cooperation with the surrounding communities for flood mitigation. Public-private partnerships are working in downtown, are working to help with business retention, business attraction, and will be the solution for workforce development. Local schools and school districts will also be a big part of our workforce development solutions. And it will take the entire community to battle this heroin problem that we are encountering. My promise to you is that I will cooperate. I will give you my best effort. I will give you my time and my energy. I will communicate and continue to communicate with the citizens. If you have a question, ask and I will find you an answer. I would ask you that when you do go to the polls, please remember to vote no on issue 3, and I would also appreciate your vote for Grant Russell for Findlay City Council. Thank you.
Mr. Schindelbecker, closing statements.
Mr. Russell mentioned communication and cooperation. I would add another C, consensus. I've always considered myself to be a consensus builder. I think I can see both sides of an issue, and I think I can define it. And I think that's going to be very important. It has been in the past. We've reached a number of agreements, and we've reached consensus with, as Grant said, county government, the schools, the business community, and so forth. I've been here almost 50 years. When I came to Findlay, this was a big town. Now it's a small city. And there's a difference, and we need to recognize our problems are different than they were in the past. They require different solutions. I'm open to those, and I would appreciate your vote for Tom Schindeldecker on November 3rd. Thank you.
Mr. Wobser.
Doug, thank you very much for putting this on tonight, along with WFIN, the Courier, and University of Findlay. It's great to have the opportunity to come and talk about the issues that are confronting Findlay, and let the citizens give them a good chance to make an informed vote on November 3rd. As we look forward at what the city is going to have to deal with in the coming years, I look forward to working with the rest of City Council. I promise that I will give my best, and to that end, I will work hard and be very diligent council person. And I think that my 2 Republicans that are also running have set a very nice guidelines and set a high bar as far as communication goes. Forward to continue that along. So, again, thanks for the opportunity, And I would ask for everybody's vote on November 3rd.
Ms. Harshfield.
I too would like to thank the University of Findlay, the Courier, and WFIN for having this forum tonight. I would like to remind people that I want to be a voice for everyone in the city. I would be open to input from anyone who wishes to have their thoughts brought out. I strongly believe in education as a solution to many of the problems, and that back and forth communication is a big part of that. I'd like to see us do other little programs that would help build more understanding of situations such as the recovery homes, and definitely not impose them in areas where they're strongly opposed, but find some sort of a solution, such as actually the way it did work out. It was unfortunate that there was so much unhappiness on the way to that.
All right, thank you. And thank you to all of our candidates. And we'd like to thank you for joining us tonight, as well as UFTV Channel 20 and the students who are getting live fire exercises in live TV tonight. Also want to thank WFIN and WLFC for broadcasting this over the air, and of course the Courier online and in print coverage for covering this evening's activities. Thanks most of all to those of you who watched and listened. We hope that what you heard tonight solidified your sense of the candidates. Remember, if you heard something tonight from a candidate that clinched your support, early voting is already underway. And of course, Election Day is November 3rd. If you're still undecided, there will be plenty more chances to hear from our candidates. We'll have in-depth coverage from all four of them on WFIN.com next week, starting on Monday, so look for that. We want to thank the sponsors for this evening's forums, and thank the candidates for taking part. I'm Doug Jenkins, wishing you a good night from the University of Findlay.